Hello, here are Bärbel
and Gunther
from TRESS ACADEMIC, and welcome to this audio of the Smart Academics blog post number 41, in which I tell you a lot about my PhD. It's about the highs and lows of my PhD.
Are you at the start of a PhD? Or maybe right in the thick of it? Have you completed recently or some time ago? This blog post is for all and any of the above. This is a special post because we wanted to share a different type of PhD experience with you, a personal one.
Today we are sitting together, that's Bärbel and Gunther, and reflect on our own PhD experiences. As you know, we often ask about your experiences during or after your PhD. And in our courses, we listen very carefully and with great interest to many of your stories and reports. Some are hilarious, some are unfortunate, and more often than that, they are deeply touching on a personal level. So with this post, we've decided to give back and share some of our personal experiences with you. We'd like to help those who have started or are in the middle of their PhD and cannot see the green grass on the other side of the fence yet. We also would like to help those who have doubts right now whether they'll ever finish or are in a phase where they are thinking of abandoning their PhD projects. Think twice, because a PhD is totally worth it. We've also thought about what advice we could offer in retrospect to those still in the trenches.
All too often, our focus is on the scientific experiments, the hard facts, the papers, the dissertation, and less on the fun things that are also part of the PhD. That's different today. We want to provide valuable tips and advice gems throughout this post that we hope will lend you a hand.
We will take turns interviewing each other about our PhD experiences. And in this post, we start with my experiences. Tune in to one of the following posts on the Smart Academics blog, and you can listen to Gunther's experiences as well.
The interview flows along a string of interesting questions, things you've probably always wanted to ask about our PhD time, but didn't think you could. Enjoy listening to Bärbel's journey now, and if you do, please share your PhD story with us. Drop us simply a message at info@tressacademic.com. Okay, folks, let's start with a bit of background information. Bärbel, how did we actually start on the PhD path?
Sure. After graduating with master's degrees from Heidelberg University in Germany, we went straight on to do a PhD. We spent a few months over the summer applying for scholarships, organizing funding, and also doing preliminary literature reviews to decide on the exact topic of our individual PhD projects. Then in the autumn, we enrolled and started working on our projects.
Right. And then at the end of our first PhD year, we moved to Denmark for our fieldwork, and the fun part of our PhD started. The conditions for PhD students at Roskilde University were amazing. So we stayed there until the end of our PhDs and even for postdoc positions afterwards. We started this journey together, but we've, of course, had very individual experiences. So let's turn it over to Bärbel for her personal highs and lows. Bärbel, nowadays you often deal with the more serious experiences, challenges, and problems of PhD students in your courses completing a PhD successfully on time, which is why I would like to hear something more cheery from your own PhD. What was the funniest experience you had during your PhD time?
Yeah, there's one thing that definitely comes to mind here. It was during my PhD defense, so pretty much at the very end of my PhD. You all know a defense is quite a formal and serious occasion. So my main supervisor was the head of the examination committee, and he sat together with my two other examiners. They were both distinguished professors, one from Belgium and one from Germany. My defense was public, so there were quite a lot of people in the room. And sometime into giving my defense talk, I saw my supervisor pulling out a chocolate bar and offering it to the other two examiners.
Wait. You say that during your defense, your supervisor offered chocolate to the other members of the committee?
Believe it or not, it was a totally comical situation. Yes, I saw it like happening in slow motion. It was like in a movie. The two other professors looked at him with their poker face mixture of surprise, irritation, and disbelief, and politely declined. I cringed and had to bite my tongue not to laugh out at the same time.
Wow, this is surreal.
Totally. I knew my dear supervisor, of course. He's the most relaxed person on the planet, and he had always a chocolate bar at hand. To eat one during my defense was totally in character. It was not attempted bribery.
I guess you have to explain this. Why was it intuitive for him to offer chocolate?
My supervisor, this is totally true, folks, would occasionally go to the supermarket and buy like 40, 50 or more bars of chocolate and store them in his office. And whenever we had a meeting at the institute, it started with him opening and sharing a chocolate bar. It was like a kind of ritual. So chocolate was all around, and it was a must for every supervisory meeting. Believe me, the amount of chocolate we ate during my PhD is without equal.
Okay, guys, listen. You better speak to your supervisor about what he or she is planning on offering the committee members during your defense. Okay, Bärbel, since we now know your sweet chocolate experience, is there anything that you would say was the opposite? What was the most dreadful experience you had during your PhD?
For me, that was definitely when I was hunted by a bull while doing fieldwork in Jutland.
Sounds daunting. Tell us more, please.
I was doing research on organic farming practices, and part of my empirical work consisted of fieldwork on agricultural areas in different Danish regions. I did this to validate information that I had extracted from aerial photographs. So I would normally drive out in the morning and then spend the entire day roaming fields, often without meeting a single cell during the entire day. I had the permission of farmers and landowners, of course.
This sounds like typical field work for a PhD study, but what is about the bull?
Well, one day I was mapping a huge meadow with patches of habitat. I had to enter the fenced area to map the ponds and hedges. I was totally focused on my work when I suddenly heard a noise behind me. I turned around and saw a big bull in full gallop running towards me. The scene is ingrained on my brain forever. I grabbed my stuff and ran as fast as I could. In total panic, I reached the nearest fence, climbed over it, and jumped across a water-filled ditch into safety. The bull came to a halt on the other side, pawing the ground and snorting its nostrils. Believe me, I've had a great respect for bulls and cows since then.
Holy cow! Or should I say, holy bull! Did you go back to fieldwork again after this?
Well, I had to, but it really took me a while. And to this day, when we're hiking in the mountains and I'm crossing a meadow, I steer clear of bulls and cows.
Okay, folks, what we've learned from this lesson is that doing a PhD is not only hard work, but can also be dangerous. Watch out there. Well, let's talk more about the things now that were enlightening for you and also valuable for our audience. So tell me, what was the biggest learning experience during your PhD?
Good one. Well, my entire PhD was one massive learning experience for me. I learned new things every single day, and that is also what, in hindsight, I enjoy most. The learning happened in so many different ways. I acquired a lot of knowledge, of course, in my subject area and beyond. It was a total immersion in the super stimulating scientific environment at my department in Roskilde, which had a very flat hierarchy where everyone could say what they were thinking, and that was great. And there was also the international exchange with other PhD candidates and scholars from around the world, which taught me about all kinds of different backgrounds and experiences. We had a lot of philosophy of science type debates going about very fundamental issues and scientific approaches. There was also a huge difference between the scientific traditions and the way we did science at Heidelberg University and at Roskilde University. We really got into debates about the normative, descriptive, and positivistic scientific traditions. It was a complete game changer, which broadened my horizon and influenced my way of approaching and applying science for the rest of my career.
I remember those debates. It took us quite a while to grasp these different philosophy of science concepts, but once you got it, it was like passing through a secret door, and there was completely new land on the other side, an epiphany. It fundamentally changed your point of view. It was an inspiring time. We spent quite a bit of time dwelling on the sticking points of PhDs now, but don't forget, this is a period of learning, and like any other, where you are surrounded by people with the same thirst for knowledge and desire for exploration. Not everything you discover during this time will end up in your dissertation, but it will change your perspective and probably bring you a few friendships. The pride you feel in your accomplishments shine especially bright because for many of us, it's the first major project you've taken charge of. So, Bärbel, will you share your proudest moments with us too?
Yeah, sure. One day, I was invited by the Danish Ministry of Agriculture. The minister had organized a kind of round table discussion with a few experts to advise on measures to mitigate the negative impacts of farming on the environment. And I was one of them. I got this formal letter of invitation, and believe me, nothing could have lifted my self-esteem more in this moment.
I mean, sure, that's great for everyone to be invited by the government, but what exactly made you so proud of that?
I think this was the first time ever that my professional advice was requested and valued. It was a superb feeling of acknowledgement and gave me a huge boost in motivation to go on with my PhD. I could finally see that my results would have some effect. What I was doing would matter.
Good point. And I know this is often something young researchers quite understandably long for, to see that one's work has value beyond the academic environment. It's not just results published on a paper, but knowing that someone is tangibly benefiting from your results and expertise. But I guess it was not always sunshine and fancy lunches with government officials in your PhD, right? There were some hard times as well. Thinking back, what would you say was the toughest time you had during your PhD?
Well, in spite of all the fun we were having, I was working very hard all the time for really long hours. So it felt like the going always was tough. I remember during the sunny summer days, I would never let myself take a break or go swimming at the beach or do anything else just for fun. Sometimes I looked out of the window and felt a bit sad, missing out on so much sunshine. Like so many other PhD students, work is great and exciting. And then, you slide into that habit of just working and not doing much else. And I think this should be added as a little warning. I really had to alter these working habits a few years later, when I had worked a couple of years as a researcher and suffered from burnout. So by then, it was definitely getting too much.
So there's quite a lesson to be learned here, right?
Yes, definitely. Today, when I speak with PhD candidates about their working habits, I very consciously point out that you need to take care of yourself as well. You need to take breaks. You need to take holidays. Now, there's luckily a lot more awareness for managing mental health today. And for everyone who's curious, I've included a couple of great references at the end of this blog post. So you just have to go to the blog post's website and then scroll down right to the end. But of course, still, that does not mean that a PhD today is any less stressful.
But on the plus side, you didn't have a complete breakdown or crisis, right?
No, not me. But I remember that the final months were very intense. I was under a high amount of pressure to complete on time because my stipend would end and I would simply run out of money. So I knew I had to be finished. No excuses, no extension. But I also remember wanting to finish the PhD so I could move on with my life. I was ready for the next level.
Well, change was right around the corner, because in the final months of your PhD, as I remember, you also worked on a research proposal that then secured yourself a postdoc position. So that may have also added to the stress. But let me get back to your supervision once more. That's something our audience is curious to hear about, I'm sure. You've written a blog post a while ago called Good PhD Supervision, What Can You Expect?, in which you point out the main pillars of high quality supervision. Now I'm curious, how good was your PhD supervision? How did it influence you or your PhD?
Yeah, actually, if you're interested, you can read that blog post. It's still on our website. It's number 10, Good PhD Supervision, What You Can Expect. So about my supervision. For me, it was actually twofold. First, I had my main supervisor at Heidelberg University. He was a very experienced scholar, very knowledgeable, He'd been involved in the development of the very first models predicting climate change, which was brilliant, but he was extremely distant. Like, I would meticulously prepare for every meeting with him and still be hyper nervous to say anything wrong or anything that would not please him. Yikes. Having a supervisory meeting with this professor felt a bit like being granted an audience with the Queen. Seriously. It had the same aura. I mean, there were no discussions. You would simply do what he said. Or, to be more precise, you would try to understand what he might have meant to say. Because you definitely not dare to ask back. I would rather spend hours trying to figure out than asking for clarification. Weird, right? Then at Roskilde University, my supervisor was quite the opposite. He was so laid back and very supportive. Just fantastic.
And he had a lot of chocolate.
Not only that, whenever I had a problem, I could come to him and he would help me fix it. It was also with personal things. He was always ready to lend a hand.
That is so true. Remember when we needed some furniture for our tiny apartment? We just moved up to Denmark, rented an apartment, but it was totally empty. So we needed some furniture.
Yeah, and some is an understatement here, because we had literally nothing. So my supervisor would speak to the janitor at the university so we could get some old stuff from the repository. Hilarious. Our home looked like a classroom. We had the same tables and chairs like we had at the university. But back to my supervision. So my supervisor really felt like an older and wiser friend. With him, I could discuss, I could argue, disagree, and speak my mind. That enabled me to develop my own scientist's personality. You need that kind of freedom to get there. He was also great in the sense that he had a huge international network of influential scientists around the world that he happily introduced me to. And he also encouraged me to attend scientific meetings and PhD courses. We had a pretty close relationship, and I owe him a lot. We're still in touch, and I'm so grateful that he was such a fantastic role model for me. So later on, when I had my own students at the university, I would always try and treat them as good as he was to me.
Okay, folks and supervisors, be good to your PhD students and they'll pass the good supervision gene on to the next generation. That's PhD genetics for beginners. Well, Bärbel, what advice would you give to PhD candidates who are doing a PhD right now?
I have a ton of advice here. Focus on just your PhD and have a clear goal. I think you've got to be very focused on just this one major project for the time during your PhD. Also, have a very specific goal for your PhD. And I mean really specific. I think that makes it easier to distinguish unimportant stuff from what really matters for your PhD in the end. You need to be committed to. You've got to put yourself 100% behind the goal of getting the PhD. And then walk the talk and crack down on your PhD tasks every single day. That's when you'll realize great things happening, like valuable insights, new discoveries, and you make big progress. Oh yes, and one more. Be wary of the time. It flies. And faster than you think, it runs down when you're not paying close attention.
Okay, folks, get your notepads out. It takes focus, clear and specific goals, total commitment, and keeping an eye on the time.
Yeah, or as an alternative, grab our Smart Academics blog post number 2. So you want to finish your PhD on time, where you can read it all in more detail and you can get great tips to get started yourself.
So, we come to the last question, Bärbel. Do you think it was worthwhile putting in all that effort to get a PhD?
That's definitely a 10 out of 10 from me. The PhD has put my life and my professional career on a totally different level. All in all, I worked 12 years as a scientist, that's my PhD included, in 4 different countries and at 4 different universities and institutes. And this has enriched my life in countless ways. I've got friends and colleagues in many different countries, and I still benefit from this network. Believe it or not, I'm still in contact with people who I met during my PhD courses. Imagine what it will do for you. I also think scientists are a special breed. They always connect over shared scientific interests and can put everything else aside, and that's great. I feel totally at home in this environment. This is my tribe. Also, you forever adapt this mindset and the scientific way of thinking. You apply your scientific and analytic skills to everyday life. After your PhD, you are a scientist. Once and forever.
So true. Nothing I would change about that. Now, have you enjoyed listening to Bärbel's PhD experiences? Have you a hilarious story to tell about your supervisor, about your fieldwork, or anything else in your PhD? Just think about chocolate or the bull. We'd love to hear from you. Send us an email and share your story with us. You can reach us at info@tressacademic.com. Thank you so much.